So our objective is to get at least one more in each by the end of the evening. Can't really see that from over there. Well, it's not the greatest view, but maybe somebody can zoom in. Um, and like I said, I'm watching, like, these things are pulled up. So if anybody decides to be generous and help out our institute and all that we do, it'd be much appreciated, to get to share in this ministry with everyone. But this is also a Q&A. So I also have, of course, our chat going. And for any, you think we should open up where people could join the Zoom call?
That is interesting.
I mean, I'm not opposed if somebody's brave enough to jump on here.
Sure.
And ask their question.
Sure. If someone wants to do that, absolutely.
So we are going to make that an option. If somebody really, sorry, I'm trying to copy that. Get this. There we go. Okay. We will share that Zoom link as well. So
do we know how to also live stream, not just onto YouTube, but from here onto Facebook Live?
I clearly am not doing so good at just streaming to one platform, so I'm not quite trying to do a multiple thing. Although that would be quite wonderful to do.
It would, and I think it's doable. I just don't know myself off the top of my head, anyways.
Yeah, may have to have you set this up in the future, because I'm something I'm doing isn't right. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, it's cool with me. We can talk about that before next month, anyways.
Okay. But yeah, for anyone that's watching, this is a fundraising evening where we're gonna keep up live with our monthly donors. Our goal is to reach 100 $10 or more a month donors. We also have a Patreon, which currently has 4 people on it. The fun thing with that is you get some resources that are only available on there, such as our compendium of moral theology. And it's also where you can get early access to some of our articles. I know Alexander is a very prolific writer and has many articles coming up. I've put out quite a few recently, which have some more to come out in the coming months. And there's also our course.
We wrote one a few months ago. We're still waiting for that one to get published, though.
Oh goodness, we have so many that one that we started last summer. Yes, for anyone who's watching, a little hint about some things that are eventually maybe we'll get around to finishing, or a article on the morality of anal play and how one could do that morally, if that could be done morally. Discussing the nuance.
I think we have some different views on that within the organ. If it's okay for me to say that, we the three of us see differently about all that. So I think I'm guessing, and I don't know actually, but I assumed that it was some kind of stalemate that led to us just putting that off.
Wanting not so much a stalemate as wanting to really present the best arguments of each side. Because I do think that, there are plenty of theologians that are on either side. It really falls into that camp of things where it's almost a point where there's so many good arguments. It's like, which way feels more pious to you at that point, right? Which one seems in at a supernatural level when reason fails. Which one seems the most aligned with God's will?
Yeah, and that's a tough one. Like of all the kinds of foreplay,
Right.
if you want to put it into the three kinds, this one is definitely. I think a lot of the theologians would say there's something potentially problematic there, including us both. I mean,
Mhm.
our apostolate doesn't even necessarily encourage it.
Oh,
Of course, what you're talking, of
I'd say
course, what you're
even if
talking
we
about in
say,
that article is a little different than penetration per se. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt
right, and I mean, even in, of course, you and Alexander are, on the side of, like, if I'm not mistaken, that there's no time when it's moral for penetration of the anus. While I don't want to go quite that far, um, I will grant that there is, of course, the risk of sodomy, or of sodomistic desire, all those things, right? Um, as you see with the traditional theologians. Um, but I would grant that there's potential for, like, um, use of marital aids. I think could be done morally, but with all of them, I think they're to be discouraged.
you. Yeah, yeah,
Partially just because it's not very sanitary.
yeah. Right, and that's what brings about people's natural sense of revulsion.
Right. I mean,
But I also have to grant with you that there are strong or good minds on both sides.
yeah, there are medical, I think, and even, like, in theology, of course, we have two different sides, but even in medicine, there's pros and cons to consider. Um, for example, prostate milking was actually historically done as a medical intervention. Um, can still be done. Uh, but it's generally not considered necessary. It was more palliative care.
Hmm.
The time historically, it was considered as um, necessary to relieve the infection or to relieve an inflamed prostate. Now we can just use antibiotics that will typically knock it out. But in any case, until that the antibiotics have worked, it can be quite painful, and that is a very effective way to alleviate some of that pain. Um, but on the other hand, if done improperly, which many people do, um, things without a lot of mm, care when we're dealing with the sexual things, in the heat of the moment, people are oftentimes not as cautious in some ways as they should be. Um, if you're not careful, anal play, regardless of what you think about it morally, can be quite dangerous.
Yeah.
Um, there's been more than a few people who have died from it, to be quite blunt.
Yeah. Yikes. Well, I mean, and that's, yeah. So, I mean, I would say my position is I could not, in good conscience, encourage it under any circumstances. I do want to throw one objection your way and see what you might have to say about it, though. And this objection seemed to be convincing to Dr. Robert Fastigi.
Mm-hmm.
Was that there was something said by the Holy Office where they were asked, um, could a wife agree if her husband wants to commit and quote the crime of the sodomites with her? And they said something like, "Not no, you can't." She couldn't agree to that for any reason whatsoever. That seemed to change his mind, but I'd be curious
Mm-hmm.
as to, first of all, if you've heard that one before, or what you might say to that one. Would you respond that the crime of the sodomites simply refers to completed, the completed act versus an act of foreplay, or I don't know. What would you say to that?
That's where I would question, what do they mean by the crime of the sodomites. I would assume it would mean that they're talking about a completed act, and even kind of separate from trying to avoid this applying to. You might say, okay, my thesis is it could be used, right? I would, when we think of the sin of the sodomites, we are thinking of, homosexual acts that are complete, right? Um, which pretty much every moral theologian, at least, and certainly all the ones that I would follow,
Right.
do acknowledge that the sodomistic desire or intent certainly must be avoided, right? So as soon as you say the crime of the sodomites, instantly it sounds like there's sodomistic intent, which universally theologians would agree that is inappropriate. That is immoral, right? Um, and yes, adding the element of is it a complete act, that certainly is condemned universally by the church, but also, well, I mean, the church, of course, the ultimate authority, but many saints have had many, many things to say on that topic. So, it's definitely one that I think we do need to address. I addressed it in that article years ago when I was addressing the concept of the inappropriate vessel, as the old texts tend to refer to it. But when we're talking about the inappropriate vessel, we mean any orifice that's not the vagina. So, which I wonder if YouTube is going to kick us off for this. Oh my! It's
keep an eye on that.
I don't know. We might get a flag about this later. We're gonna have to figure out what we're allowed to talk about or not. But in any case, hopefully not. Hopefully they don't fuss too terribly hard.
There's worse stuff. We're trying to help people understand what's moral and not. And yeah, we're touching on the topic, but we're doing it in a Catholic academic way. And, some people look, and I know some of your critics would simply just start laughing at us right now, but you got to understand, some of these moral theologians from before the Second Vatican Council who we have dived into. I mean, some of them agree with you.
Yeah.
Some of them don't, I suppose, but some of them do. Right. I mean, there are a few big names that you could name off right now.
Right.
Merkelbach is one of them.
Merkelbach, I was about to say, Dr. West and his, when he talks about this, he always cites Merkelbach, and I'm not as familiar as I would like to be with his theology, but I do know him from the bits I have read of Merkelbach. It's fantastic moral theology. It was an excellent manualist.
I mean, you can't just laugh these guys off.
No, the churches, many popes have spoken very highly of several of these. Like Tanqueray's work was strongly recommended by the Vatican. Merkelbach was used extensively in Germany's in seminaries across Germany. Some seminaries in the United States, not quite as much. Tanqueray was used extensively across Europe and in the United States.
Even Christopher West.
Today.
So, I mean, you can't just dismiss it. And I gotta, and I will say, I always strive to be consistent within myself, right? And we talked a lot last month about if the church doesn't outright condemn something, there's a good chance you're probably at least in the clear. So, I mean, at
least that maybe if the not in the clear, because the church could always condemn something down the road, but
until then, though.
Until then, yes, but I would say at very least it leaves a possibility such that I am very leery to, make some sort of universal condemnation, right? If the church is not willing to make a universal condemnation of something, then I think that theologians could. I think there are some theologians who, with their experience and expertise in specific fields and sort of subspecialties, maybe they are in a position to teach something as universally, condemnable, which the church may then use in formulating a universal doctrine. But I would say the majority of theologians should not so easily make such broad statements.
I mean, even then, if you're going to take the leap to do it, you ought to at least be honest and say the church hasn't done this yet, but I'm going to go ahead and offer my view on it, and the church can take it or leave it. And the reality is, even this, as obvious. Maybe I don't want to say obvious, but even you who would say it could be allowable would not encourage it. Right. So even something like this, which almost seems obvious enough to be like, well, yeah, you shouldn't do it. I mean, I would have no problem saying that, but I have to not acknowledge that the church herself is not, to
Mhm.
my knowledge, and
Right.
it sounds like to yours, said that no, well, while preparing for the marital act, don't do this.
Right. And even with the case of like, like you asked about that dubia to the Holy Office, I have no doubt that such a statement does exist, but it they left it. It's not so clear cut as, oh, yep, that never can be. There's many other ways they could have worded that to specify any use of this orifice is condemned, right? But to that wording of the sin of the sodomites, that's a bit more precise and definitely makes it a little bit harder to and of course I'm sure there was context that would have helped as well, right? A lot of times like in the
I don't have
Denzinger,
the text in front of me, so
right? Well, I mean, in the Denzinger thing about it, you have these little bitty excerpts of text, and dubia typically are quite short, so that it's a yes or no response. And sometimes the Holy Office will give an extended explanation. Sometimes it is a very short response, just an affirmation or negation of it. And the people asking the question may have given a longer explanation of what they meant with that question, but sometimes it isn't quite so evident, and especially in those little excerpts. That's kind of why they used to talk about seminarians who did Denzinger theology. They would just cherry pick these little excerpts of things without any context and slap it into a paper and be like, "Oh, we're good." It's like, hold on now. So,
well, yeah. So that's an interesting one. So, folks, I mean, if you want my opinion, don't do anal. If you want James's opinion,
I would
probably
still
ride the
recommend you not do
staircase in a different way.
that.
Yeah, no. So yeah, just don't. I mean, the hands and the mouth should be more than enough to have fun with. But
Mhm.
we digress, huh?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so we got that hopefully coming up. What else we got coming up?
Talk to us about. So you have released a number of articles just now
Mhm.
about various programs, coaching programs you want to implement.
Oh, yes. So I have kicked out several programs. I'm going to pull up my page to remind myself even how many I have, because it is quite a few. Let's see. I'll share that in the chat as well. Okay. So I've released 6 new programs, addressing really the most common issues that I see, right? Every couple has their own nuances and particular goals and whatnot, but oftentimes they fall into some pretty common categories. And to the extent that I've already worked with very similar things, I finally decided to make these programs to make it more efficient for the couples to try to use their time, my time, as efficiently and effectively as possible, by giving us these guides. Because with some issues, say deep-seated relational issues, it's a lot of discovery in the very beginning of like, what are your actual goals, what are the conflict, and learning conflict resolution skills, stuff like that. So it's every session is dynamic and not necessarily pre-planned, but with the programs, they are very planned and structured, allowing us to tackle very specific issues very efficiently. So with these programs, the first one that have is female sexual response and orgasm training. A very common issue I see is women who have never orgasmed, or perhaps it's been many years since they have. And so addressing what that might be, the techniques, mental work, which is a huge element, sense of connection, safety, stuff like that. Very closely related to that is rebuilding sexual intimacy after birth or medical trauma. That's another one that's very common, is that after one of these forms of trauma involving a woman's sexuality, it can cause her to sort of disconnect from her body from the sexual act, making it very difficult for her to experience it without pain and very often with any pleasure. And so by working through that with specific techniques to increase the sense of safety and connection with their spouse, we're able to make the marital act a safe space such that even though working through trauma, like with a trauma therapist, is a very good thing to do, this helps women to have practical tools to be able to experience intimacy, whether or not they have had that trauma work. Because sometimes they've had the trauma work already, but they're still, as what one psychologist says, or many now say it, the body keeps the score, right? And so in this way, maybe they've done the mental part, but they haven't learned how to let it go out of their bodies yet. And so through these exercises, through this program, I teach them how to do that and walk them through the steps of doing that and with their spouse. Low libido support for men and women. Low libido is incredibly common. And even I say low libido because that's what people tend to search and tend to refer to it as. But actually, that's not so much a problem. It's the mismatch of libido, right? When one spouse has a higher, it could be that both of them have, clinically low libido, but there's a disconnect in the frequency and or desire. So they have to learn how to adjust and try to meet each other's needs without being demanding or selfish or, getting frustrated about what they need to do to have, marital intimacy. So again, very common one I see. Try to address that one. Erectile and performance difficulty support. ED is incredibly common. A lot of people, it's not talked about nearly as much, but it is very common. And unfortunately, it's been highly medicalized in that big pharma, ever since the discovery of Viagra, has realized they can make a lot of money off it. And so doctors very quickly jump to prescription responses with mixed success, right? If the issue is a physiological issue, then a physiological response is most appropriate. A medical response is appropriate. You see that especially in older men. But when you have men in their 20s who are experiencing this, maybe there's another issue at play. So we have to address that. And there are some very efficient ways. That program is actually quite short. It's only 6 sessions. And usually, even by the halfway point, most men have seen a significant improvement in erectile and performance.
I want to pause ask one quick question right there. When I go out and speak in light of and do things with my, my primary work at Covenant Eyes, I do make the observation that more and more men in their 20s and 30s are having problems with erectile dysfunction. I don't see how we could argue that porn has something to do with that, but I would ask, to what degree do you think pornography actually is a factor here?
So it can be a factor. I have worked with men where they were using, and in fact, for this program, it's a requirement that you not have active porn usage. That has to be something that was already dealt with before, because since it can be a factor, right? We would need to address the use before we could address the difficulties, right? So that would be a much longer program, and it is. So I also have a overcoming pornography and masturbation program. Of course, last year we did launch the accountability partner program with not a lot of interest. I've had one client that I've been working with on that for coming up on a year now. So the accountability is like every other week, very low intensity style work. But through the work with him, and then also through a handful of clients I had before we started growing the team, I realized that I needed something much more intensive. especially in cases where there is sort of betrayal dynamic. So, there's cases where one spouse is using, but it's not causing a great deal of emotional distress for the spouse. Some couples, it's like, okay, they're struggling with that, and it's not great, but they some spouses see it more of as an illness, but if they are seeing it more from the perspective of a moral failure and a betrayal, then it can tend to have a much greater relational impact. Okay. So this program is specifically for couples who are in that sort of situation where it's causing significant relational distress, and other interventions have failed, right? Because this one is very intensive. So for the first 6 weeks, I meet with each spouse separately for an hour a week. And then we go into 12 weeks of weekly sessions together. And then after that, 12 sessions spaced every other week to a month. So it will typically, I predict for most couples, it will take a full year to complete. And that's partially just because with any sort of use disorder, or sort of behavioral addiction, as it would be called, which I will say, and this is, of course, can be controversial in Catholic circles, but I don't actually say pornography addiction. Because clinically speaking, the original sense of addictions were with those chemical addictions. And there is a general trend within psychology to distinguish between what can be commonly referred to as behavioral addictions versus those chemical ones. And of course, pornography does have a chemical effect, but that effect is not in the same class as with those chemical addictions, right? When we talk about the hormonal responses, dopamines, all that is typically where people want to associate it with an addiction. But clinically speaking, it's not quite the same class of those. And so I do follow the sort of mainstream clinical sexology in referring to it, this grouping of issues as out of control sexual behaviors, right? Because we can't quite easily say like this is something that there is some sort of compulsion involved. But also to take the other reason I don't like using the term addiction is I want to step away from the shame-based exercises. Some programs to help men get out of pornography usage lean very heavily into shame and shaming and yes, pornography use is a moral disorder, but just bashing someone of like that's sinful and bad and very quickly turns into you are sinful and bad. And for long-term positive effect, it's very difficult to bring about long-term positive change if everything is negative and shame-based. So, and then the last program that I've started is Advanced Sexual Practice in Marriage. That is a bit more of a boutique thing that comes from working with some couples over the past year and a half who really didn't have any problems. They were actually doing quite well. They wanted to get from the doing quite well to the fantastic level. And so
good for them.
I mean, yeah, it's great. But we are a nonprofit and we do have bills to pay. So most of our work is with couples where they really, really need it desperately. And for my caseload to have couples who really don't need it, they just want it, they're going to pay a little bit higher price so we can have more money to do all the good things we do for free and for much lower rates. So, yeah. Any other questions or thoughts on all those programs?
No, that's good. That's good. That hopefully will make for a really good year with those, kind of paths that different people can go on, and not everyone. Let me just make one distinction for the listeners. You're not saying it's the case that if someone is in coaching, they're on one of these paths.
Correct. Yes. For example, I have two couples right now who because they have overlapping multiple issues, then we can't use one of these. And that's why, like, in the articles about these programs, it specifies like who is this for and who is this not for, right?
But that
So
doesn't mean there's people you're just coaching and they don't fit into one of these boxes.
right, and those are typically going to be those longer, more complex cases where there's multiple layers. Like I have a couple that, they haven't had sex in 10 years of being married, at all, ever. And so there's relational concerns, but overall their relationship is fairly strong, despite that. But we also have to deal with ED, right? So there's different elements at play in that one, where clearly it was enough of a concern, enough of a difficulty that they haven't had sex ever. They're both still virgins after 10 years of marriage. That this is not going to be something that's going to be fixed in a quick and easy 6-session thing like I might do for someone who's only been married for 6 months and having these difficulties. And actually those examples are actually more common than people would expect. The number of couples that I see who have not had sex 6 months, a year, multiple years into marriage.
You mean they have not consummated their marriage?
Correct. Ever. Like they, not even just to consummate the marriage and, then not planning to be a Josephified marriage, just, it might be fear, anxiety about it, because media puts a lot of pressure on what sex is supposed to look like in that first magical time. And it can be a lot for some people. The anxiety around getting it right. And lo and behold, they don't realize, but you're not going to, everyone's first time is a mess. It's okay. That's why you go on a honeymoon. So you have opportunity to fix it.
Yeah. And it's not only the first time necessarily.
Oh, goodness, no. I mean, so
I think we made this analogy last time. I mean, I think that, how better off would some couples be if, just to take from John Deloney from the Ramsey Network, I do like him quite a bit. If you viewed each time as practice and not necessarily as the Super Bowl.
Right. That's actually goes similar to an analogy that I've used is that, having, your wedding night, losing your virginity, it's like you're trying to learn the rules of football while playing a Super Bowl. There's all this pressure, this excitement, like this is the culminating event of all of these things, but you don't actually know the rules yet.
Right.
Never actually held a football before. You don't know what you're doing with it. And now you got to get out there and play.
Right.
Fortunately, the person on the opposing team hopefully also is not quite as is kind of in the same boat, and y'all can both bumble through it together.
Right.
Or in the case where one spouse has more experience than the other, which these days is very common. We live in a sinful, broken world, and even devout Catholics these days, people who are now devout Catholics, maybe weren't quite so a few years ago, where I'm seeing it very, very often where you'll have one spouse who maybe saved themselves for marriage and the other spouse who did not. But, you can't change the past. So hopefully they can use what they did learn from that to help both of them. And that's something that we actually talk about in session is, how do you, you can't erase it. So what can you learn from that? Can you step away from those sinful experiences and extract information about yourself, about how to do things practically that you can learn and you both can benefit from? So far, we're only 2 weeks into January. I have one erectile and performance difficulty support client. pornography and masturbation one, and one female sexual response and orgasm. No, not that. I have one tentative on that, and then one for the birth and medical trauma.
Nice.
So,
Well, I mean,
libido. There's one couple that is sort of overlapping about three of these
sure,
programs, but a lot of the interventions are very similar.
Sure.
Program to program, it's more like between the two female ones for like sexual response training and the medical trauma, they're very, very close. They're just like 2 or 3 interventions that are not necessary in one that are necessary in the other, and the sequencing is a little different. They're just discovered with time. Like some things you don't need to prep for if there's no trauma. Some things you really have to address first if there's trauma. So, but we are I'm going to take a moment here real quick to refresh these pages and see if we have any updates. I was hoping that by the end of this, we might see one new donor or subscriber. That would be absolutely fantastic. That would be all sorts of fun. But in any case, well, none so far, but we got a little bit of time left. Hopefully we will get one new donor or one new Patreon subscriber, and we can grow our little thing. We can update the chart, which people can't see, but if anybody's jumping on now, we currently have 6 monthly donors, 4 Patreon subscribers, and 9 course subscribers. So increasing that by 1 in one of those categories is our goal for this evening. We're here both. Well, we both have plenty of things we can do with our families and things to keep up with, but we also believe a great deal in this mission, this movement. Well, movement. I don't know if we can really say a movement, but
maybe at some point. But the mission certainly
a mission. There's a lot of good to be done. A lot of need for this.
Oh yeah.
Every single couple I have, says, "Why didn't I hear about this sooner?" Time and time again, and it stinks, but it's like, well, I mean, we've only been around 3 years, and there's only a few of us, and none of us do this full time.
Right. Yeah. And the more thought I give that, the more I realize that's actually a big deal. We're either, I don't want to say competing with, but there are a number of apostolates where people give themselves to it full time, and that's great. That just hasn't been able to be the case with us. The benefit of that is we bring a lot to the table, but that also limits what we can do.
Right. Now I am hopeful that within the next 2 years we will have some full-time people. If we are still looking for a fundraiser, and that's going to be a deciding factor if we can do that. They may be the first full-time person, right? If they can bring enough money to pay for their salary and then be growing,
right.
We can hire more people. That will be a key element. I still have the dream of the app that would bring together some of the resources that I've developed and make it more streamlined and effective for couples. Because we have a lot of projects coming out. Like I've done a massive revision of the Yes, No, Maybe guide, which I've started using in session with couples, but I haven't released yet to the public. I still need to get Alexander to go through and be the editor that he is and destroy it for me. And something else that, I don't think you've heard about this yet. Well, no, you would have seen the article, but the new coaching program.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
I,
Let's talk about that though. I mean, that's a big deal.
so did I publish an article about the
Yes, you did. Yeah,
okay,
we sent out a thing about it
that's right. Okay.
at the beginning of the year.
That's right.
But actually, that was a news thing for me too. Both with the fact that you've decided to open up the hiring process for a fundraiser. Thank you again for that. I'll speak to more of that in a minute. But then also for this coaching program.
So the coaching program, we decided to launch it because we had somebody who asked for it. Somebody who had their own, marital learning curves over many years and couldn't find resources and had to kind of figure it out on their own. And when they finally did find us, they were like, wow, this would have been so great years ago when I was going through all that stress and strain and trouble and marital woes. And they started praying about it, and they were like, I feel like I should be involved somehow. And for the last 3 or 4 months, they've been praying about it, and finally reached out in December, and we're like, hey, I feel called to become a coach. And it's like, okay, we got to figure this out. What does that look like? How does that, how do we make this a systematic thing, a sort of an official training that we can certify? Because, I have a decade of seminary formation. I have over 90 hours just of human anatomy and physiology, right? I have, a master or a graduate certificate in marriage and family therapy, about to finish a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I have hundreds of hours coaching, which a lot of that was trial and error. I have formal training in the Plicit model, which is classic to clinical sexology. I've attended conferences in clinical sexology. I've done a lot of things, but it's been a very long process to learn. And coaching typically is very short. I did a Catholic coaching program. It only lasted 6 months. And while it was fantastic, it's not the same type of coaching that we do in the sexology world. So trying to identify what this would look like for someone, how do we get them the moral theology that they need without them having to go get a whole degree, right? Because as a coach, you don't need a master's degree. It's not like mental health care where you have to get a license, a master's degree. And I firmly believe that there are plenty of people out there who could learn to do this well without, spending the next 10 years in school. Once you have the foundation of moral theology, part of that is just knowing where to look and who to ask, and a lot of the questions that people ask are the same questions. So once you know the answer to some of those more common ones, you're going to get through most of the stuff. I don't use the majority of my theological education very often in this, but I do have a foundation that I can answer questions. And I'm not going to recommend something to somebody because I already know what is and is not moral. And so my programs are built around being moral, right? So we did a lot of research, a lot of prayer and discussion, with Megan, our clinical director. She hasn't done a lot of clinical directing since we didn't end up getting any therapists on board. But she does have a lot of experience with supervision and participating in trainings for clinicians. Also with Alexander as our theologian for his feedback on what would be important to this program. And we finally settled on having this person start their training by getting a certificate in moral theology from Christendom College. So they've started Moral Theology 1 today, actually.
How long of a process will that be?
So it's 5 courses. So they'll start with Moral Theology 1 and Virtues. Next semester, they will do Catholic Sexual Ethics and Theological Anthropology. And the final course will be, by itself will be Catholic social teaching. And I specifically chose Christendom because while I looked at, the Theology of the Body Institute, which would be kind of the obvious choice, right? I chose to not go with them because since we need someone who has very practical knowledge, right? This is coaching that's very pragmatic. And Theology of the Body Institute is not teaching people for practical things because the Theology of the Body of John Paul II has a lot more than just practical elements. And actually has very few practical directives in there beyond what is generally already known of, abortion, euthanasia, all those things, right? But it's more of a anthropology, Christian anthropology, which talks about his vision and his understanding of the human person, which is fantastic. It's very interesting. It's just also very long. And so there's really no point to get someone to have 30 credit hours of which will take them over 3 years to get because of how the structure is, and just to get a course in, the poetry of the human person. While it may be quite interesting, they're not going to use that in coaching. So we need them to get something that's going to be much more pragmatic. And I wanted them to get a certificate of some sort so they have not just, our say that they have training, but they also have a certificate, a credential from beyond Amy that would support the quality of their education. So we're treating it kind of like a prerequisite program, but also doing it at this, co-enrolled, so to speak. So once they have, and then, so next semester when they start Catholic sexual ethics, they will also start their formal training in clinical sexology. And they will start with some didactic programs that I'm putting together to get them some pretty basic elements of like the things that I see most often. Once they've gotten through the sexual ethics and that foundational phase of the clinical sexology, which is primarily going to be biology, anatomy, physiology, very basic. It's going to be addressing sex on the functional medical level, but that I believe is foundation before they ever get to talking to anyone about it. Is you need to know how it works. Like you need to be the subject matter expert on how does the body work in this regard. But once they've completed that, then the third semester, they'll finish up the last course with Christendom. They will continue moving into the clinical phase of the didactic part of their clinical sexology training. And they will also start shadowing. So they will be joining me in sessions with clients who specifically agreed to that to learn what I do, how do I do it, who do I talk to, what do I address, and start to see how I use all of these programs, right? How do we use these structures? Outside of session, they will alternate between each week for an hour-long meeting with myself one week and with Megan the other week to help get them to well, it's parallel to supervision that we would do on the clinical, on the therapy side of sort of mentoring them, looking at their case notes, looking at their coaching plans, letting them ask questions or talk about clients that they're currently working with. At that point, they won't be working directly with clients, but they will be, it's an opportunity to talk about, okay, they'll say, I saw this thing you said or you talked about in session, the client responded this way. Why did you address things that way? What was the advantage? What was the track you were trying to get to, right? So they can start to wrap their mind around it. Once they've gotten through a semester of that, so right about this time next year, they will become the primary coach for their own clients. So they'll have a full year of training, which again is 6 months longer than traditional coaching programs, generally speaking. They will have their own clients. They may still have a little bit left to do for the clinical sexology training, but because that is expected oftentimes to take 18 months to complete. So they will need to keep working on that diligently. But they will start to get their own clients. They're expected to have at least 250 direct client hours, in addition to those weekly, hourly supervision sessions, by the end of that year, which even working part time is very doable. But if they're motivated, they could pretty easily get to full time. I believe that as much as we're growing, as much traffic as we're seeing on the site, there's a great possibility that we could be needing someone to be coaching full time within a year. Um, there's plenty of people who I can't work with simply because I'm active duty Army. There's hours in the day where I simply cannot coach ever. I don't do weekend coaching ever because one weekend out of the month, I'm going to be on duty. If not twice a month, because it's fun like that.
And you're gonna make sure you walk the walk, and make sure to have some quality time with Megan, and
right,
and do what you need to do on the other 2 to 3 weekends a month.
Right. I have other things to do than just this. As much as I enjoy it, I also need a break from it. But yeah.
Well, and you also need to live the very thing that you're telling others to try to help others with.
Yes.
Marriage.
Yeah. Yes. Which is also why, clients notice I shift my schedule as needed it may seem odd what my hours end up being, but it's usually because I'm trying to match Megan's schedule. Try to synchronize when our sessions are, so
that's awesome.
Can have some time, even if it's a bit late in the evening, to hang out. But yes,
you expect nothing less.
Yeah. Well, if it wasn't for as good of a wife as she is, we would certainly not be here as an organization. It still amazes me that we've gotten to where we are all because this was her idea. That she was like, you know what, this needs to happen. We should do it. Okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think it's only, it's only uphill from here. I sometimes struggle with that analogy because it's harder to walk uphill. It's more fun to go down the hill, actually.
Yeah.
In a matter of speaking, but I think we're moving in the right direction. Before I hit on the web traffic, by the way, just one kind of side point. When you talk about theology of the body, it's actually a widespread misconception that a lot of the kind of foreplay, what's allowed in marriage stuff that we talked about, people think it comes from theology of the body. It doesn't, actually.
No.
It predates it with all these theologians that we have in our compendium and more, much more. But people, I don't know what is it? Just because Christopher West talks about theology of the body and this, you think that's where that comes from? I don't know where that comes from.
I believe that's exactly it. That, so many people have heard theology of the body in the same breath as someone teaching Catholic sexual ethics, right? But again, if you've ever studied, like I, had the formal course on Catholic sexual ethics, which we call De Sexto on the Sixth Commandment, right? It's a very dense, very formal, structured course, right? It reads nothing like those Wednesday conferences, right? Because we're trying to get a dense amount of information in a very short space, right? The Pope's conversations are dialogues flow, and he talks about ideas and all sorts of things. But he doesn't get down to the nitty gritty of things. He's trying to give general principles, general ideas to help people have a different idea of what the human person is, relation to God, relation to their sexuality. But he doesn't give many practicals. Like I don't think he mentions oral foreplay ever in there.
So it's a common misconception that somehow all this is connected to him. It's not. These guys we're talking about, Merkelbach and Kendrick and Alphonsus and all the others. There's way before him.
It wasn't meant to be. And the theologians who talk a lot about theology of the body and these other sexual topics, they learned it somewhere else.
Right.
The majority of them are theologians who had a degree in something other than theology of the body, right?
Oh yeah.
Right. Most programs, most master's level programs will have a Catholic sexual ethics. Certainly all seminarians have to do it, and most of them will focus on theology of the body. But they have to talk about they have to use other sources or they won't cover it all. Like you
Well,
simply,
and they have to get into that practical stuff because that's what the people have
that's what
questions
people,
about.
as
And
somebody,
it's a big part of why we exist because, with all due respect to priests, which me and James have both studied for, I mean, how many of them are going to talk with them on this practical level about this stuff? I'm ready to believe some of them, but enough of them.
oh, it does happen. It does happen.
But I'm saying how many of them are prepared to give those answers? I believe definitely some, but again, enough. I don't know.
Well,
What
I
do you
mean,
think?
case in point, I had a permanent deacon as a client at one point. Because he and his wife were having difficulties. The wife asked their pastor, who then said, "I don't know. Go find a Catholic source. There's got to be something online. Go Google some. There's got to be somebody who's talked about that." And they found me. And I was thinking as I was talking to them, like, you are allowed to preach, which means you're allowed to preach on moral issues. Your pastor preaches on moral issues. And neither one of you knew the answer to this question, which sadly was something that I learned at like year 3 of seminary.
Pretty basic, huh?
Pretty basic, but I understand why, because in some seminaries, they decided to use theology of the body as the principal text for their De Sexto, which left out a lot of these practical things. When I went through my Catholic sexual ethics with Holy Apostles, it was one of the texts, but it wasn't the only text. Now when I went through it with the Institute, we used one text. It referenced a great many others, but we used a text written by a French monk, which was very much in the manualistic style, but kind of it was really cool in that he basically made a compendium of his own of the moral theologians, who had written on all these different topics. Read a little bit like the Cantata Aria, on this topic, here's what everybody has to say.
Yeah.
It's really a fantastic text. Helped me a great deal to understand these things, and I've referenced it so many times, especially in the early days of trying to write some of these articles. But yeah, it was sad to hear like 2 clerics who preach, who give spiritual direction, who didn't know the correct answer to something that's fairly basic, and that to me shows the failure of some seminaries, not all, but some seminaries and some diaconate formation programs.
In this particular area.
Yeah, in this particular area.
For sure. Nothing about those guys as as men,
right? No,
or even as clerics as such.
And the sad thing is, a lot of people, you're not going to know what you don't know. There's plenty of priests who get out to their parishes, out of seminary. They know what seminary taught them, and they have no idea what seminary left out or didn't teach well. And not why I say teach well, I mean sufficiently to give them the practical knowledge to work with faithful on the questions they get in the confessional.
And it's hard because even though seminary is supposed to prepare you for all that, you can't get to everything as deeply as you'd like. You just can't. I mean, even in my primary work at Covenant Eyes, this is something that I will have to talk about with people, because even when you're, and you and I, having been in seminary within, the 21st century, that, pornography, even for those guys, is a big thing right now, right? So there's a lot of guys worried about it, struggling with it, whatever. But even in the academic moral theology, you can only talk about it maybe a class period or 2, but there's what I can tell you is that there's just so much more that priests would benefit to know. Mm-hmm. That's why, I and some others, we actually go and do workshops for some of these priests, because there was just so much that they couldn't get to in seminary.
Right. It was always so frustrating, reading these texts and having access to a wonderful library in seminary and being frustrated. There was so much more I wanted to learn. And one of my superiors had to remind me that studiosity is a virtue, curiosity is not. And that, there's times when you have to temper yourself and recognize that your formators have chosen specific things for you to learn. and that's what you need to learn and learn it very well, and accept that there's other things that you need to put aside for the time and wait until there's time to do it down the road. But right now you need to
Right.
focus on what they give you, because there's simply too
Right.
much to learn in, you know, a 5, 7, however many year program you're in. You know,
Right. Right. But so, I mean, but the good news is we're here. Right.
Yep.
And, I think, we have a lot to offer, and I think we're only going to continue to move up. Let me just comment real quick also on my gratitude that we are hiring someone to handle fundraising and grant writing. I'm happy to come on and do marketing, but I think it took us a little while to realize it's not necessarily my strong suit. Doesn't mean we don't need it, though. We need it.
you do, for
And
sure.
for anyone who's willing to, who has a knack for that kind of thing, you'd be benefiting a really great mission.
Absolutely.
Because even as as someone who works for it, I just read the articles that you and Alex put out, and it's like, man, this is just such good stuff.
Yes.
And it's just not as known and not as talked about. But clearly needed. And honestly, too, I think one of the proofs is our traffic is definitely going up. We can talk about the website in a second, but I open up Facebook every day and it'll be like, oh, you got 40 new views. You got So I mean, it varies. Some days it's 15 new views, some days it's 45 new views or whatever. But we're getting the views,
right?
And how about the website?
The website, I mean, I'd say it's been weeks since we had less than 200 people on the site any given day.
A day. Does it distinguish between visitors and new visitors?
So those are unique users.
Unique users. So someone who goes on today and comes back tomorrow isn't going to be tracked as a new user.
They're not going to be tracked. So these are people that day. So if they come back tomorrow, they will be tracked that day.
Got it.
There is, of course, a metric for new users. We probably see about half of those are new users, quarter to half. We have a lot of people that come back frequently. We have,
and still, it's awesome.
I mean, we have people that have been coming back to the site fairly regularly for years. There's some people who've basically, I mean, we have an email chain at this point going back to 2022, where every few months they'll shoot me an email and be like, hey, I have another question, and we'll talk about it. Like, I saw this article, I wanted to address my, how would you respond to this, objection or whatever. So we have a lot of traffic, which is fantastic. That's why I really want us to lean in to the articles to get those resources out there. Alexander is so good at what he does.
So good at what he does.
And that for many couples is the best resource we have. Just they can search, and lo and behold, we have something for it. I know he really wants us to write a book. I love that idea. I love his enthusiasm. I don't know when either one of us is going to have time to write a book. It should happen, but it may be a little bit down the road that we actually get down and put pen to paper to do that.
Yeah. Well, and that just speaks to the fact that we actually have a number of ideas on, how we're going to grow, how we're going to get attention. We'll talk more about those behind closed doors and leave the listeners to, wait in suspense. But you can help us too. I mean, just, tell people about this. I mean, who doesn't like, who doesn't get interested in sex? Seriously. No, but seriously, right? I mean, any gathering you go to, I mean, as long as you're fairly comfortable with the people around, I mean, any one of our articles should make for at least one interesting conversation you might have that day. Probably should have said that last month before all your holiday parties and stuff, but it's not going away.
Yeah. Anybody that's watching, also just an update. We're still sitting at 6 monthly donors, 4 Patreon subscribers, and 9 course subscribers. We would love to get one more in one of those categories tonight. The links are over in the chat. We'd much appreciate it. If you are already subscribed, you're already donating, thank you so much. It's much appreciated. It really does make a difference. You know, as such a small organization, the less we have to worry about, you know, do we have enough money to pay for all these apps and tools we use? Do we have enough money to cover payroll? The less we have to worry about that, the more we have time and energy to focus on, you know, the coaching, on the free moral consultations that Alexander does, writing articles and everything else. That, you know, I definitely know how tight money is these days, and I really appreciate the people that have gone out of their way to donate. You know, we've had donations as little as, like, I think the smallest was like $3, but we've also had people who've donated $800. You know, and really come through for us and helped us out, and all of it makes a difference. And those little $10 a month donations make a huge difference because they're adding up. And slowly but surely, we're going to get to that point where we do have that steady flow of those little bitty donations. So they're not quite as painful to each person. You know, many hands make light work. But it's going to be enough where we do have that foundational income. We have that enough money to be able to budget and plan, you know, for enough hours for Alexander and for Theo and Parker to really put in that back end support work and grow all of the free resources we have to do the moral consultations, and free up time for, like, myself and for Dr. Ramirez to really focus in on our coaching, and getting that one-on-one contact with people. So all that help is much appreciated.
Well, and the more we have, the more we can do. You know, I mean, we haven't even begun to talk about things like taking out ads and, you know, just trying to, you know, use some funds to expand our reach. You know, right now we're SEO, we're word of mouth, we're people, you know, sharing their experience, whether they're clients or readers or whatever. Which we depend on too, right? You know, or whether they're clergy who, you know, who maybe don't know the answer, but they knew enough to say, check out Catholic Intimacy, and you know, right. We appreciate all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, we pray for you. I know I pray for you every day in my daily rosary, and morning communion. Not always in daily mass, but I do try to get to daily mass as much as possible. You know, and I very frequently think about the couples that I work with, about the readers, the people who've reached out, throughout the years. You know, even, you know, people, like, we'll have people that will respond to our text and be like, "Hey, thank you," you know, or they'll like our text when we say, "Hey, mass was offered for you this morning." You know, it's pretty fantastic. You know, we've had people reach out and say, "Hey, we're praying for you." That's a great day, you know.
Yeah.
For that to be reciprocated. But we've definitely seen God's blessing, God's mercy throughout this process. For anyone, if you happen to be watching and have been around for a while, you've seen that we've had ups and downs, a lot of ups and downs, but more ups than downs. You know, we continue to grow. We continue to bring out some fantastic stuff. Our organization, the people involved, growing. Again, we didn't have an ad out for a new coach, sexual intimacy coach, but lo and behold, we have one in training. You know, so clearly God is putting people in the right place, even when we don't know we need to ask for it.
That's right. That's right. I mean, we almost thought we were going to close down at one time, and there is grace. He saved us from that. And don't forget, your donations are tax deductible too. We've been approved for that.
Mm-hmm.
We've been approved for that. And if you're somebody watching too that has a platform who supports us, I mean, we're grateful. But you know, if you want to support us publicly, we'd be grateful for that too. We know a number of people who, you know, their names you might know, but you know, and they support us privately, but publicly they're a little bit reluctant. And at various times, I can maybe understand that, but you know, I think we're kind of, aren't we past those times, James?
There's still some who are hesitant because, like, yes, we are an apostolate. Yes, we are very clearly Catholic, but some people are still nervous about, we talk too directly. We hit things on the nose. They're like, if it was like kind of implied, it would be a little bit easier. It's like, well, there's already enough of that. Somebody has
charity,
to
man.
just call it what it is and say, put this there. That's not sinful. Don't put that there because that would be sinful.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes people, and that's why people love our stuff, because, we're blunt. We say it like it is. This is what the church teaches. This is what the church does not teach. I've had plenty of articles where I talked about what the church does not teach, because so-and-so, some other writer, it's like, yep, this is dogma. It's like, no, it's not.
Right.
Right.
And I believe that many of them are very well-meaning, sincere, love the church and love Christ, but you're doing damage when you go further than the church does.
Right. And that's what we're here to help prevent. It was actually some of those articles that we discovered because when Meg and I were newlyweds, we had a bunch of friends who were also newlyweds, and they had questions, and they would find these articles. They're not immediately coming running to us, but they would find these articles like, wow, that seems really harsh, or very libertine, and they would bring it to me and be like, hey, what is this, what the church teaches? And it's like, no. But giving a formulated response, it took a little while, but we pretty well, I would say, refuted the majority of the most popular articles that were doing damage, that we initially saw that they were affecting people around us. So
more to come.
More to come, for sure.
More to come.
Alexander is not shy of theological controversy, and he is very tactful. He is, God bless him.
Very.
He is so much more tactful than I am.
Been so much more knowledgeable than I am too. I have and I have in mind some possible unique kind of collaborations that we haven't gotten to yet. I'm smart enough to look at a number of things he says and then maybe ask a question, or, well, what about this? Or, maybe you didn't include that, but to come up with it all from he has a mind for that I just don't right now.
Right. It's sometimes a lot easier to, give the objections once somebody has formulated something than it is to come up with the original formula.
Yes, I can ask educated questions about anything that he puts out, but to just generate it all from scratch the way he does, I mean, and to translate it, I know you know a number of languages, so you're both very much more capable than I in that regard, but still, that's an amazing skill. I mean, with this compendium, he's put things into English that have not been put into English before.
Yes, quite a bit that has never been put into English before. I mean, the thing's 102 pages long.
Yep, right.
Some of it was already in translation, but
sure,
I want to say close to half of it are his original translations, which is just.
I mean, we already have something we could put in print if we really wanted to, but I feel like
we could. He wants to keep adding to it and tweaking it.
Rightly so. Rightly so. I mean, there's definitely room to add on. I mean, I think because he takes a number of theologians into account, but there's even theologians who don't, who just haven't appeared there, or even in any of other work, who further, are the proof of the kinds of things that we say. I mean, there's a long list. I think the best list compilation I've ever seen of that, actually, not in print, but verbally. Tim Gordon was talking to Christian Wagner, and he listed a bunch of names, and he actually went pretty long. I don't know if you saw their conversation. It was actually quite good, but he made a list of theologians who, when I was watching it, I thought, oh yeah, those are the guys who would probably agree with most or all of our stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many.
Yes.
I'd also be curious if when we finally do get the compendium published, if you wouldn't also publish responses to maybe theologians who disagree with some of these newer theologians who've written things that contradict the other ones. Of course, a compendium is a compendium. We didn't just cherry pick things to because they're good, but there's other, like some of these new theologians who didn't make the cut simply because they're not to the level of, say, the moralists that he chose from pre-Vatican II or whatever the case may be. But I would be actually in favor of including some of these newer voices, in some cases simply to refute them
Right,
and
right.
demonstrate how much of these other theologians, how many of these other theologians very much disagree with them, and that it's actually the opposing ideas that are the novelties.
Right, right. No, yeah, that's good. Plus, I mean, I think right now we're in a place where if we put together this compendium with all pre-Vatican II theologians, it's like, oh, okay, but I mean, the post-Vatican II theologians matter too. So, I mean, eventually I think there is going to be room to include what they have to say in this particular area.
The other issue is the post-Vatican II ones are, for the vast majority, still in copyright. So,
sure.
That's part of the issue. The text that he was using, original translations, of course, are his, but the rest of it are in public domain. So, well, it would make very much sense to cite many of the voices today. Christopher West, obviously. Now I'm blanking on their names, but there's several other, more or less, like there's one at Catholic University of America. Blanking on their names. There's 4 or 5 who are actively writing and teaching. It would be very interesting to include, even when they disagree with us. Like there's a few that I'm like, kind of got off the beat on that, but still quite interesting to hear what they have to say and how it compares.
I mean,
and understand their reasoning. Like, why did you get to that? How did you get to that conclusion?
There are some great Christopher West, who did we mention earlier? Dr. Robert Vestigi. I mean, there's going to be some good guys like that. Janet Smith. I mean, and also compiling the book Why Humanity Was Right. Just some great people. Certainly after the council. Alexander had an article recently that made a really good point where just because someone's popular on the internet doesn't necessarily make them an authority, right? Even when like he typically refers to theologians who help in seminary formation or whatever. That's kind of interesting now, right? Because you might have and I don't necessarily know him as well, but somebody like Dr. Gregory Popcak, right? Like he's Dr. Popcak in virtue of his psychology. Does he have a theology degree? I don't know.
I don't think so. Off the top of my head,
I'm not saying someone has to be credentialed in certain ways for their ideas to be right.
Right.
Otherwise, I wouldn't even count. But
a PhD in, I want to say it's like human services, because he's an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker.
We have massive respect, just for anyone listening. We have massive respect for him. I mean, James, wouldn't you say his book Holy Sex had some inspiration here for Amy?
I mean, yes. When we started writing, one of the first things I did was read his book, because I was like, well, I never read his book because I didn't feel the need to. It didn't really apply, but I was like, well, this has had a great deal of influence. So before I start writing and sort of join my voice to this community, I need to see what someone who has made a huge impact is saying on these topics. And I found it fantastic. It was a wonderful book, very well written, which I'm sure has done a great deal of good for many people.
Which only proves that what we're doing here, people want, and it gets attention. We just, we still need to either get to the algorithms or we just need more public whatever. But I mean, so.
And time. Dr. Popcak has been working for many, many years. He also founded, or I think he's the program director, or was the program director of the Catholic Counselors Certification Program through Holy Apostles College Seminary. That one is a really cool thing. And anyone who is, if you happen to be watching this and a licensed clinician, I would strongly recommend, if you don't already have a degree in theology, to go and study that, because it gives you a sort of a crash course in moral theology, but also in tying in how to practice with that faith-based mindset, right? Of course, with all of our, credentialing bodies and with our national associations, right, they tend to be quite secular. Our formation programs as therapists are very secular. So his work, I haven't taken the courses myself, but I've read the syllabi and talked with some people who have, and I think it's fantastic. So if you are a clinician, I would strongly encourage you go and benefit from that. And like I said, if I'm not mistaken, he was the program director of that and got that kicked off for them. Yeah, he's done a great deal of good in a lot of different.
Absolutely. We like it. We like him a lot. I mean, we don't at this point personally know him, but the pastor of my church is on his radio show, once a week or something. Father Thomas Loya is on Dr. Gregory Popchak's show, so they're very good. They're pretty good friends. And Trent Horn did a video today where he recommended holy sex for the purposes of his video. So I mean, respected for sure. But I guess I was just making the point that. So we understand, it's kind of a tight line, right? Like someone doesn't have to have all the right credentials for what they say to be correct and useful. Yet when, we're helping people to kind of, understand what's right and what's wrong and avoid scruples. When St. Alphonsus talks about an authority, he's not talking about just anyone, even if they're widely publicized on the internet, which obviously he wouldn't have had anything to say about the internet. But the point is, now that's a little harder to distinguish, right? Because all kinds of people present themselves as authorities on the internet, right? And I realize the irony that we're doing that too, but
we're not. The big difference is that, like when we're using some text or we're defending a position that is used by other theologians, we make sure to cite them. We find those quality resources and references. And
sure, we're not claiming our own ideas,
right? And I mean, which obviously is just basic writing principles, but avoiding plagiarism, but also to show our readers like, no, this is not just me saying it; it's Saint Alphonsus saying it, Saint Thomas saying it, it's Merkelbach saying it, but also
whoever
on the issues that are a matter of opinion, right, of theological opinion. There's times when I've said that in my articles, like, hey, church has not defined this yet. Here is my opinion. Like one of the first ones I did that on is on the question of multiple orgasms for a woman, right? That theologians, a lot of the old texts don't even really mention it. It's not addressed. How would you do that? Now, some will say, because of a woman's frigidity, the husband can help stimulate her to orgasm after intercourse. Well, I was like, well, why specifically after? Could it not come before? Could it come during? Why after? And so my argument was I would go beyond that and say that it could be before. And that I'd say that partially from a pragmatic perspective, that many women are not able to reach orgasm after their husband's ejaculation. And that also is a very popular thing in the world of clinical sexology, is her first. While that may sound very woke and feminist, it actually is very pragmatic in our field, and that it works very well, is to help the wife reach climax and satisfaction first, and then for the husband to finish. So I expand on that. Now, a couple years after I originally made that statement, I found there is another theologian, Dr. Germain Gries, I believe. Blanking on
Grise or something?
Grise, yeah. He specifically also says before, during, or after. Now, I've yet to find one who talks about multiple orgasms for the wife. I'm of the opinion that the goal is not just to reach climax, but to reach satisfaction. Which, because of how a woman's sexual response cycle is, many women, they will have a smaller orgasm, which is sort of the like warm up to the one that actually gets them into the refractory period, into the resolution phase, where they have that sense of relief and release. So I consider it as a continuation between one to the other. They are on a biological level separated, but I would say that the multiple orgasm is very much permissible. And so that's my opinion. That is my theological opinion. And I have my reason.
I would agree, for whatever that's worth.
I've yet to find someone who disagrees, unless they disagree with me on a bunch of other things. There are those who think if she happens to reach orgasm through penetration, then that's what she gets, and that's about it. I think that kind of flies in the face of the unitive aspect, and of the cure for concupiscence, which of course is subordinate to that aspect, because especially in this modern day and age when there's almost as many female pornography users as there are men, you are putting her effectively in an occasion of sin.
That's what Trent Horn's video today was about.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. There's another theologian who agrees with us.
And I mean, it was about the reality of females struggling with pornography, not about a marriage or her climax within it. Just to be clear about that. But I was going to ask you something, and it slipped my mind. I'm upset that it did. Anyways, you were saying?
Oh, just that I believe that it is important for the husband to help his wife reach orgasm if possible. Many cases that I see, it's because it has not been possible for them. And it's oftentimes in those cases the husband who initiates coaching because he realizes that in some way he's failing his wife. Many of those women have sort of resigned themselves to like, okay, well, I'm never going to have sexual pleasure, and oh well. But
do you think there are a number of husbands out there who, just don't try hard enough to make it happen for her in one way or another, or
yes,
who largely disregard it?
There are, and I've seen plenty of cases like that. It's usually quite sad, because at that point in the marriage, most men typically, especially when they first start having sex with someone, they want her to be satisfied. Typically at the point where they don't care about her reaching satisfaction is about the point where she doesn't care about having sex with them, right? So it's the only reason she consents to sex, she treats it as like, so he can get off, and just like begrudgingly lets him have sex. Well, at that point, because she's so begrudging to him and puts up such a fight, it's kind of like he just needs to hurry up and get it done. And his response is to also not be as interested, which of course makes the problem worse, because since she's not enjoying sex, of course she's not interested in participating, and it ends up with a lot of bitterness and resentment. So while yes, I do see it, it usually is a two-way street. It's not just because the husband is just cold and callous and doesn't care. There's usually a reason why he's cold and callous, and these are systemic issues, right? So it's not I wouldn't say there was a single point where like, okay, this person messed up in this response and kicked it off. Usually these things start very small, and a lot of times with misunderstandings or like the human faults of simply being an adult that lives with somebody else, but they add, and people don't know how to address them and how to communicate well about them. And next thing you know, it's become quite an issue that ends up killing their marriage.
Are there a significant number of wives out there who have a tough time reaching climax regularly, even when means like oral and manual stimulation are regularly utilized?
Yes. The vast majority.
Because I understand it's regularly difficult from penetration alone. Many women just can't. But I'm a little less informed about when those means are utilized. I know it. I mean, obviously, I know it can make it easier for them. It can, but the question is, as far as the actual how it plays out, does it? Surely, for many, it does. But the question is, are there some for whom it does not?
Right. So you gotta realize that there's multiple ways that women can orgasm. We would generally categorize them as clitoral orgasms, vaginal orgasms, and breast orgasms are three primary ways. Okay. So with clitoral orgasms means we're talking about direct stimulation of the clitoris. Now realize that if you're stimulating the vagina, you are also stimulating the crux of the clitoris, because it actually wraps around the tissue of the clitoris is actually parallel to the tissue of the penis. And the clitoris is effectively the head of the penis, right? So it's stuck there as a nub, but the shaft, what would be the shaft of the penis, wraps around the vagina. So you are effectively stimulating the clitoris at the same time, but you're also giving direct stimulation of what's commonly known as the G spot or the Grafenberg spot. which is actually a very silly name because it's just the name of Dr. Grafenberg, even though it was his wife who helped him discover it. But as it goes, you get to name things after yourself when you discover them. But it is actually the urethral sponge. It's a bit of spongy tissue around the urethra, which swells with blood to protect the urethra from the friction of intercourse. And it's full of nerve endings. And so you're stimulating that in a way that you don't with clitoral stimulation, which is why we categorize it separately. Some women cannot reach orgasm through penetration alone. The most common female orgasm is clitoral. Second is vaginal. Third is breast. Some women, just stimulation of their breast alone can cause them to reach orgasm. Some women do reach orgasm through anal penetration or anal stimulation, while that is probably the fourth most common. There are others, very rarely, but it is possible. And I have seen cases of it. Some women can reach orgasm simply with their imagination, sort of willing themselves to an orgasmic state, and they can push themselves over the edge without any physical stimulation at all. Pretty rare. But like in the years of doing this, I've had one case of that. But usually when I have a couple that is where the wife is struggling with what in clinical terms would be orgasmic disorder, female orgasmic disorder, I don't diagnose or treat in that sense. So we don't use those terms typically, but that's how it would be labeled. If they haven't been able to reach orgasm by the time they're seeing me, typically they've already tried those methods. Typically in those cases, those women are not able to reach orgasm through penetration. And so adding manual or oral stimulation, it's kind of weak. It doesn't help them. If a woman can reach orgasm fairly easily, then they can through oral and manual. But the issue of just they may not because they need more stimulation. The other issue is most men aren't very good at either one. And that's they're no fault of their own, just no one's taught them how to do it properly. And like the part of the reason I don't like saying the G spot is because people think it's a button and they try to jab it. It's like, no, don't do that. It's a sponge. Stroke the sponge. Come hither. That's why I have this very convenient little cutout of the female pelvis here so I can show people. Come hither. Some women, so that's what, because of that difficulty, the other issue is that orgasm is a learned skill, so to speak. And when you haven't learned it yet, or it's been a long time, your brain's kind of like, doing that's not going to work, right? Your brain's kind of giving up on this, whatever. And when your brain goes into
that's the biggest sexual organ right there, the brain.
Right. Like when you go into sex already thinking it's not going to happen, it's a good chance it's not going to happen. So we have to sort of trick the brain out of that to the point where they can have orgasm. And the brain goes, oh, wait a minute. I remember how this goes, or I'm learning how this goes. And typically we will see them increase in the ways they're able to orgasm. So if, say, they were only able to orgasm with clitoral, with sort of getting used to orgasming, we can add in typically penetrative orgasms, which is a lot of couples get really excited about that, the idea that they can synchronize their orgasms. I tend to tell people that it's nice, but that should not be what the quality of their sex is measured by. Some people do. They think that, that's the ideal. Sure.
And that's a thing that's out there in some of the popular Catholic, and even John, in Love and Responsibility, John Paul II himself said that. So, there's a lot of Catholics out there who have that idea from some solid places.
Right. And I think that, again, if we say ideal, sure. I think that is very beautiful and an ideal. We happen to live after the fall.
Right. Not that much is ideal.
And not that much is ideal. And so if we recognize it as an ideal, like when it happens, that's fantastic. Cool. But if you're saying that if that didn't happen, if you didn't reach the ideal, then somehow that was bad sex, which I have seen that. couples that think that. It's like, well, you're kind of selling yourself short. Like this.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the orgasmic difficulties are very, very common. I would say almost half of my clients, the wife struggles with some form of orgasmic disorder or difficulty, which is why we very often use what in some circles is referred to as vibrator therapy. It is not exactly that, because when you say that, people think of things that are not what I teach. That's why I prefer to refer to it as sexual response training, because the device that they use is not what you would see in most, like if you're imagining going into like the old Hot Topic or whatever it was in the mall back in the 90s. If you ever were to see what I have clients get, it looks like a medical device for a reason. And it's because it is not meant to replace your spouse. It is a training device that is incorporated into the marital intimacy, kind of like training wheels. Most couples, a lot of couples are nervous about adding this thing, but it's only there as training wheels. Once the wife's body has learned how to be stimulated, typically then they are able to reincorporate oral or manual stimulations quite effectively, and they no longer need this device. So yeah, it is sadly very, very common.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Things you learn. Yeah, I didn't know that. So, but and I figured you would. That was something that came to my mind as of late. Cool, good stuff. Anything else we want to? Any updates at the moment?
Not that I can think of. I mean, of course, I did mention some things in the welcome to 2026 with us newsletter about the coaching program, about these new programs. But I'm really excited to see what this year is going to bring.
Me too.
It's going to be a busy year. Aside from all the things that the Army likes to keep me busy with, I am going to start my therapy internship. So I'll have to knock out 400 hours of direct client work, preparation for my therapy license. So that's pretty exciting, and navigating the scheduling of that around my coaching. So, yep, we've got a lot of good stuff going on, personally and as an organization. So I think it's going to be a busy but very, very fruitful year.
Agreed. Looking forward to it. If all of the people listening would pray that I can get my voice back. I mean, I'm able to, with a microphone like this, I can do okay, but it's been just for over a month. It's been more or less shot. Actually, not. It was much worse than this, but I need it back soon. So just keep me in your prayers, everybody.
Well, I do believe it's getting about that time. We should probably wrap this up. If anybody's watching, over there in the chat, there are links to different ways to support us, whether it's by signing yourself up for our courses, whether it's by joining our Patreon community, or making a monthly donation. We would love it if somebody would make a donation while we're here. Be really excited if somebody would sign up for our monthly, like a monthly donation. $10 a month goes a long ways when you start adding them up. So, but in any case, for everybody that's watching and participating, or watching and listening, I hope you've gotten some good out of this. Remember that we have lots of resources. We have Alexander's free moral consultations. We have articles on all sorts of topics. And I realize we have a lot of articles. So if you get lost and you're like, do you have something about this? 9 times out of 10, we do have an article. If you just email us, tell us what your issue is, we have an article and we can explain whatever issue or concern you have. Or we can say, hey, this is going to need more one-on-one work. Another issue that I see very, very frequently is women who have very painful sex. that's why I was so excited to get Dr. Ramirez. Dr. Ramirez did not ask for this job. I've known her for a few years, and I asked her to join us. She actually published an article with us about this time last year on male fertility. And when it came time that we were growing and getting more coaches on, I was like, we need you. Please put in an application. And she's done some really good work. I'm really excited to have her.
We'll have to see if she can join one of these live streams sometime.
I hope so. I know that she has a conference that she's going to be doing in February, and she's hopeful that she's going to be able to talk about her coaching at this national conference.
Where is it?
I don't remember. It's something to do with fertility. She does a lot of fertility conferences. She is a Creighton NFP instructor. In addition to being a licensed and practicing physical therapist. But she also specializes in, she specializes in fertility, which I will say that I did not even realize that when I first met her. In the Army, we physical therapists are for broken people, because we have a lot of broken bones in the Army, and we send the physical therapists to learn how to walk and stretch and all those fun things. I did not realize how much a physical therapist can do for fertility, but it is quite a bit apparently. They can work with all sorts of issues from ED, from erectile difficulties, premature ejaculation, a lot of men's issues. Actually, Dr. Ramirez is a specialist in that, which most people have no idea that she can address those issues very effectively. To the point that if somebody presents with PE, I'm like, talk to her just straight away. That she knows all the stuff to teach you how to control your pelvic muscles. Go talk to her. So yeah, we're very blessed with this team.
Very much so. Very much so. Wow. Good stuff, man. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
Good talking with you.
And thank you for everybody for listening. And we'll plan to do these about once a month.
Yep. Hopefully next month we'll try to get some variety, maybe get somebody else to join us. I know that Dr. Scott from Faith, Love, and Sexuality, one of our members of our board of advisors, he always loves jumping on these.
Cool.
And I know that when we had our live Q&A things last summer, I think he joined every single one of them.
Yeah, no, it'd be nice to have him. I saw him before. I haven't had the chance to talk with him as much as I'd like. I would enjoy that though, for sure.
He is quite knowledgeable. He's been in practice for a long time. And he's helped a lot of couples get through a lot of things. So he is a very knowledgeable person and asks very intelligent questions. He's a convert.
Nice.
And so he's still learning the Catholic way of doing things. He was in practice for a very long time before becoming Catholic, but as many converts do, he has jumped into the faith, full force, and now has been working very diligently to bring his practice, which he was already very Christian in his practice. And so 99% was already aligned with Catholic teaching. But he's trying to get it that last little bit so it's fully Catholic and reflects the full beauty of the faith in the marital embrace. But certainly his knowledge and devotion and his years of experience in marriage and walking with couples through marital conflict, he is very good at what he does.
We're happy to have him on the board.
Yeah. So in any case, I do believe it's about time to wrap this up. And so for everybody that's watching, God bless. Theo, let's go ahead and close with a prayer.
All right.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Okay, well, I will see you soon, Theo. And for everybody else watching, God bless. Have a good evening.
Take care. Bye-bye.